Alright, before I'll talk about the King of Fighter series, the NES Cartel Saga, I want to give a retrospective on this special fan service crossover that people really had fun playing with this game. And what is it? Well, whatever happened if Street Fighter fights against the cast of King of Fighter? Yes. Excuse me. Yes. So before I talk about the King of Fighter 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, the NES Cartel Saga, I'm gonna talk about the Capcom versus series. Yes, there is, and if you've seen it before in my showcase, I kind of did three of them already. A Capcom versus SNK fighting game, a showcase. Well, two of them I did, and one of them was basically an intro, but basically the game that was supposed to take place, that was Capcom versus SNK 2. So let me explain what is this special event. So of course, any fighting game fan always loves crossover. That's like some ultimate fan service. So Kyo versus Ryu, Terry versus Ken, and Bison versus Geese, you name it. The cast of Street Fighter versus the cast of King of Fighters. So basically, the game started in 2000, and the back history is that both Capcom and SNK made a partnership deal, and the deal basically, I think it's for 5 years, that both companies must at least required to do two fighting games. It doesn't matter which medium it is, which console or system, they just have to do at least two fighting game, and then the rest they can do whatever. So starting in 2000, in the Neo Geo Pocket, you kind of see SNK versus Capcom Card Clash, a Neo Geo Pocket game, and there's actually two game versions. There's the Capcom side, SNK side, and I think one of the features there is kind of like a Pokemon thing. You can also trade or unlock cards, from what I heard, so you have a better deck. Because, like I said, there's like a SNK deck and a Capcom deck. I played it, not really good with the card game, but the biggest main feature about the Capcom versus SNK series is the fighting game. So, for the first game that first came out was SNK versus Capcom Millennium of the Future. I do forget what the subtitle is, but if you want to see that showcase, the link's going to be in the description box, along with Capcom vs. SNK and Capcom vs. SNK 2. Those are the three games that I did a showcase on. So let's just start with this one. SNK vs. Capcom for the Neo Geo Pocket was the SNK first fighting game. Again, for the Neo Geo Pocket, it wasn't that bad. Capcom vs. SNK. Again, the cast of Street Fighter, to some extent, versus the cast of King of Fighter. It also had some, for Capcom side, it had Morgan, and I think there were some others. In the SNK side, it actually had Samurai Shodown characters. So, there you go. Not a bad game, but again, it's in the Neo Pocket. So the big main event game was in the arcade in 2000 that I saw. I was still at college at the time, but when I saw this game, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really awesome. It's a fan service crossover. The two biggest giant, to some extent, well, SNK to some extent, fighting each other who's the better fighting franchise, Capcom or SNK. So the first one was in arcade, then was ported to the Dreamcast, and then to the PlayStation 1, which I did a showcase on, Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Battle 2000. There was actually backstory in that game. At first you say, whoa, okay, wow, beautiful graphic, and unfortunately for the game is fun, the gameplay, the mechanics is not that bad, but it's mostly a graphic over gameplay type of situation, because unfortunately the game did have a good roster to some extent. So like I said, it basically had the cast of Street Fighter 2, and that's basically to some extent, or Super Street Fighter 2 versus the cast of King of Fighter, to some extent 94, let's just say. So basically, the game takes place supposedly again, fictional storyline is that it takes place during the events of King of Fighter '94 and Super Street Fighter 2. So Cammy's already there, except she's still in her, or technically, well, prior to Street Fighter 2, let's just say that. I mean, if you want to get so technical, but Street Fighter 2 and King of Fighter '94. So basically, of course, the cast of Street Fighter 2, mostly 2, except for, well, yeah, Cammy also, and Akuma, there are in Street Fighter 2, versus the characters from, to some extent, King of Fighter '94. Exception for one, which is Vice. She's from '96, but again, like I said, you don't have to be so technical about it, but that's basic from what I read. That's a timeline. Duke them out, who's the better one, and then the bosses out there is either Geese Howard or M. Bison. It depends which side are you playing from. So if you're playing a mostly Street Fighter character, you'll fight against Geese. Mostly King Fighter characters, you fight against M. Bison. Doesn't really have like an ending video, but it's just mostly just like a generic video ending, and so it had like a generic ending. But again, it's still the game is fun. So what do I say graphic over gameplay? Well, because the problem is, according to Capcom, and they actually said this, because this was developed by Capcom, the game is incomplete. It was an incomplete game. They were originally what's going to happen was there was going to be like a better version of that one in the long run, which they did. The one I played for the PlayStation was Capcom versus SNK Pro. Unfortunately, they only added 2 new characters, which is Dan from Street Fighter Alpha and Joe Higashi from King of Fighter, well, Fatal Fury, but King of Fighter '94. So, yeah, they admitted, they said it was incomplete, they were going to add more characters, but it never happened, well, until the sequel. And the gameplay basically is, you have 2 grooves. You got I think they call it the Capcom groove or the SNK groove. Capcom groove was basically based on Street Fighter Alpha series. SNK groove was based on King of Fighter '95 or '96, the EX system. And if you want my in-depth of how that game worked, watch my showcase on Capcom vs. SNK Pro for the PlayStation as a commentary. Links is going to be on the description box. I kind of explain what it is. So yeah, like I said, it was mostly Street Fighter 2, except for Morrigan. Morrigan was there. And the other one is King of Fighter, except for Nakaruru from Samurai Shodown. So you say, well, kind of sucked, not a lot of characters, kind of like so generic. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of deals that they had to, which character they can use or not. And if you're wondering why also, I talked to this one before, the next cartel, is Kyo still wearing his signature high school uniform. That's why. And spoiler here, that in the Next Cartel saga, Kyo changed his outfit, but that'll be on that particular V-block. So they did a sequel actually, that one, a year later instead of improving the game, well, they did. They did a sequel. They just decided to do a sequel called Capcom vs. SNK 2001 Mark of the Millennium. Well, Capcom vs. SNK 2. And I didn't do a showcase that one because it was in the PS2. And again, I can't really do PS2 showcase unless I do it a live feed rather than direct feed. That's why at the time I really didn't do a showcase on it, just a intro. But basically the game that takes place on that one, which is now King Fighter '95 and to some extent Super Street Fighter 2. So it is still played the same as the first one, but a lot of improvement with this game. One is, first of all, of course, now more characters than ever. Unfortunately, you still have Street Fighter 2 characters, and you still have King of Fighter characters. So, but they did add some new ones. So for Capcom side, basically added a character from Street Fighter 1, Eagle. So there you go. And then of course you see him in the GBA version of Street Fighter Alpha 3 and the PSP version. Then there's also Rolento from Final Fight. What you say that? Along with Maki from Final Fight 2. And then Kyosuke from Rival School. The return of Morrigan from Darkstalker. What else? I think there's some. Unfortunately, I can't really remember much. Oh, and of course, also, well, no, yeah, never mind. Yeah, I was talking about the Orochi Yori and Evil Ryu, but they were also in the first game, so my mistake there. So in Capcom and SNK side, they actually had some of variety characters. One is, beside Nakuru finally being a normal character, there was also Haomaru from Samurai Shodown, the main character, along with Athena from Psycho Soldier, Rock Howard from Mark of the Wolf or Fatal Fury. Well, let's just say Fatal Fury, the next generation. Mark of the Wolf, which is Rock Howard's the main character. I don't know why that game's still not in the PlayStation system. Whatever. Moving on. Chang and Choi as one from King of Fighter 94 and 95 with still their prison outfit rather than their new reform outfit. And then interesting about Chang is you play as Chang, but Choi is just there as a side, basically a sidekick, but you can do some of the move from Choi, the tornado thing. Pretty interesting, especially the tornado. So again, interesting. So you just play as Chang, but Chang and Choi is there. Hibiki from Last Blade is there. And if I'm missing some, sorry, been a while when I played the game. The game had more improvement because one is they expanded on the groove system. Now they have they got CAP groove for Capcom side or SNK groove for SNK. So Capcom has CAP. What's C? Basically based on Street Fighter Alpha series. And A was based on the custom combo series in Street Fighter Alpha 2 or the VSIM for Street Fighter Alpha 3. You push two buttons together, I think the hard, and you can do custom combo. And then comes the P groove, which is basically Street Fighter 3, the parry system. Very, very difficult to use if you're not a Street Fighter 3 fan. The parry system, you know what it is. So the SNK side has had the EX group, which is based on 94 to 96, my mistake, not 95, but 96. 97, they introduced the Advantage system, which is the end groove, what basically from 97 and 98 tops, which is basically you push two buttons, you get powered up, and then your move becomes a super move. Very, very useful groove in my opinion. And then the K groove is basically based on Samurai Shodown, the POW Rage Gauge. This one is because it's weird, because in order to fill it up, you have to get beat up, and then the minute you become red, you get powerful, and all your moves are always automatically level 3. So they expanded on that one. And one of the best also this one is the ratio system. They finally fixed it. Instead of basically a character having a ratio of its own, you get to balance it out. So there you go. So it is just the same thing as Capcom versus SNK 1, but improvement. Gameplay wise, still, well, it's still fun. So the question in this one is, should it be Capcom versus SNK 3 or SNK versus Capcom? Or whoever develops said, well, whatever crossover, well, maybe it'll be nice, but right now, Capcom's sticking or focusing on Street Fighter 5 at the same time. SNK just basically trying to work on the King of Fighter 14. So we'll see what happens in the long run. I wouldn't be surprised if there is. Maybe change the title now or like a new version, but we'll see in the long run. But like I said, game's fun. The mechanics wasn't that bad. It's a good fan service. Oh, and of course in Capcom vs. SNK 2, it actually has an ultimate boss. You either have Shin Akuma or Ultra Rugal, or in Japan, God Rugal. Yes, it's not Omega Rugal because Rugal is basically based on 94. That's why that's the tuxedo, because in 95 he didn't have a shirt, and then in 98 he had this weird shirt. But again, you know, when you think of King of Fighter, you think about Rugal, and then Akuma, Shin Akuma basically in Street Fighter, really powerful but not a lot of stamina. and defense really sucked. So just think about it. But anyway, that was fun. So then again, you say, well, wasn't it the deal was to fighting game for both sides? So Capcom did Capcom vs SNK 1 and Capcom vs SNK 2. SNK did a Neo Geo packet of SNK vs Capcom. Yes, so they actually finally did their version, SNK vs Capcom Chaos, which is sort of a toned down version of their King of Fighter engine. Oh boy. I'm an SNK fan. I really want to support this game, but there was some problem with this game that it was hard to access thanks to a situation which I'm going to talk about it on my SNK vlog. I kind of mentioned it before on an exclusive vlog a long time ago, but more in depth on it. But I'll talk about SNK versus Capcom Chaos. So that's SNK version of the crossover Capcom, which is the modified version of King Fighter. I think it has roll, but this one had a dash rather than a run. And it was the same thing, it takes place in King Fighter 95 and, well, Street Fighter 2, because the roster are still Street Fighter 2 and King Fighter 95 or 96. Kyo still in his signature high school uniform. So they did have some exclusive characters only on in SNK vs. Capcom, such as in Capcom's side, they had Tsubasa from what's that game? Warzard, but I forget what the American name is. I do apologize. And Hugo from Street Fighter 3. So they're going in SNK. They actually had two exclusive ones, Earthquake, and I forgot what the other one is. Oh, I can't remember. That's how not really memorable, because again, like I said, the game itself wasn't really that popular. But it had some unique characters, like hidden characters. Actually, this game had a lot of hidden characters, such as Mega Man Zero from the Mega Man Zero series. No, not the X series, the Zero series. So he has a Zero outfit. And Red Amir, or the Red Gargoyle from Gargoyle's Quest, or worse, the annoying enemy from what's that game? Nice, Ghost and Goblin. There, Ghost and Goblin. So, and then in SNK, actually had Athena from the classic Athena game, not Athena Asamiya Psycho Soldier, but Athena with her goddess bikini, yes, and Mars Alien from the Metal Slug series. So, gameplay wise, I heard it wasn't really that good. Like I said, if you play King of Fighter, you have this. It's just basically what happened when Street Fighter Cast enters the world of King of Fighter. This is it. It's interesting, it actually had an ending, which is awesome. Unlike Capcom vs. SNK, both games didn't really have an ending. This one actually had like a still wrapped like sprite ending, or 2D ending, I should say that. But again, so it was interesting. But again, I mean, the cast. Oh yeah, and then the other hidden character now is that the Capcom had Dimitri go inside from SNK. I mean, if you want to know more about it, I think Wikipedia will probably tell you. But my thoughts about that game, I did play it once or twice in the arcade, and wink wink computer, wink wink. The game is, I'm sorry to say, it wasn't really that fun. So if you never had a chance to play this game, if you're an SNK fan, don't worry about it. You're not missing much. A lot of people even said so. Why I said it's hard to access? Well, when it was announced to be in America, unfortunately, it was originally planned to be in the PS2, and I was going to buy the PS2 version, but unfortunately, there was some issue with Sony saying that, hey, your game is 2D, and they were selling it for $50, and they said you got to lower it to $30. SNK can refuse, and they made it an Xbox exclusive. Stupid it sounded, because a lot of people who are SNK fans were PS2, not Xbox. And people even said, I'm not going to buy an Xbox so I can play this game. I mean, it is ridiculous. I don't even have an Xbox. I'm like, I would buy it if it was compatible with the 360. And sadly, it's not. This is when, well, I call it the dark days of SNK because SNK refused to put it on the PS2. They rather put it in the Xbox because of price issue. Again, like I said, I'll talk about it on the SNK V blog. So, but it is unfortunate. So, not a lot of people did play this game. But like I said, a lot of people have said this. You're not really missing much. It is just a piss poor version of Capcom vs. SNK. It's basically King of Fighter, and it didn't really make a lot of money. And again, they had to do it because of obligation, because of the deal. So that's why. So would I play this again if they say they bring it for the PS2? Well, if Sony's willing to put it in the PS2 as a PS2 download, hey, I'll buy it for $10. Because it's kind of unfortunate that they had a chance because SNK they made some mistakes with it. They were like, oopsie. Yeah, so what happened after that was the fighting game was over, the crossover was done. Capcom even said they don't want to work with SNK anymore. But then SNK at one point said that they had no problem working with Capcom, they would like to work more with them. But Capcom basically said was the opposite, and they said, nope, we don't want to work with them anymore, this is done. I mean, then later on, I think because of the 5 year, I think by 2006 or something, I think the contract was still inactive. SNK actually did for the DS, SNK versus Capcom card clash. I think that's the name. And surprisingly, I got it for $9. I saw it from the bargain bin. Yeah, an improved version of the card game. And sadly, the first print had like a Mortal Sin glitch because when you play the game like at a certain point, it freezes the game and you can't continue. They had to recall it. I think I heard they all lost a lot of money. And then when they decided to reprint this, it was a second print. But again, I hardly played it, so I can't really give my opinion about it. But I heard it's just much better than the Neo Geo Pocket version. So anyway, yeah, those are my thoughts on the Capcom versus SNK series. The Capcom side was good. I guess they probably had more money. The SNK side with SNK versus Capcom, sadly, they may have some unique characters, but yeah, the game itself, sorry, it wasn't that good from what I heard. I did play it once or twice, and I have to agree, it wasn't really that good. Okay, well, next is finally the SNK. Well, yeah, excuse me, the King of Fighters series retrospective, the NES Cartel Saga, King Fighter 99, 2000, 2001, and 2002. Thanks for listening.